Aloha everyone and welcome to another Tinker's Academy video. I am your host Kay Elmer, and in this video I'm going to share with you my research on water-soluble C60. This is not the same 60 that everyone's been taking that's been, dissolved in oil. This is a C60 that's been converted to a form that can be dissolved in water. And so now the question is, there's been kind of a little explosion of all these different products over the last few years. So I wanted to kind of cover it, and I want to ask the question to all of you, is this the next big thing in biohacking? Now, before I jump into the content, let me just kind of run over just a few disclaimers. All information contained in this video is for educational purposes only and should not be construed as medical advice. Supplements discussed in this video have not been evaluated by the FDA and are considered experimental. I have no affiliation to any of the products discussed in this video. Also, the information contained is public information as presented under fair use. Now, all studies, articles, and websites cited in this video are available in the video description below. Full transparency. Feel free to double check everything I'm saying. You've got access to all of it. All right, so just, it's right there in the video description. Now, for all of you who are pressed for time, this video is going to get real sciencey, so I'm just going to give you an executive summary of what's in the video. And so I basically asked myself 7 basic questions and spent the last 3 weeks studying what the answers are for those questions. The very first question is, what is water-soluble C60? And what that is, in a nutshell, it's just C60 that's has oxygen-hydrogen pairs bonded to the molecule so that it becomes hydrophilic. If you know C60, it's hydrophobic, meaning that it will not mix in water. It will not bond to water. So this is a C60 molecule that's been altered so that it will bond to water. So you can dissolve it in water, because regular C60 will not dissolve in water. That's why you buy it in oil. Number 2, what water-soluble 60 products are on the market? I went on a thorough scan. I think I found eight. There's actually eight companies selling it, and then each one of them either sells one product of it or multiple products of it. But essentially, there's 8 companies out there selling C60 products now, which is interesting because 3 years ago I covered this topic in a video, and at the time there's only 2. So since 3 years ago there was 2, now there's 8. That's kind of a 400% increase if you look at the percentages. So it is quite a lot more products out there that are now selling water-soluble C60 as a supplement. Now, here's the big question: is water-soluble C60 toxic? It really depends. You'll find out in the video. What are the effects of water-soluble C60? In a nutshell, it's pretty much the same as C60 with one major exception. Number 5, does water-soluble C60 promote longevity, which is the whole thing about C60, which is why it kind of exploded onto the supplement, radar. And the answer is no. Okay, now what do C60 experts say? Well, they're on the fence. I was only able to find 2 quotes on the internet. I'll be looking for more as time goes on, but right now the only 2 experts I could find that said anything about it are very much on the fence because of item number 3, the depends part on whether or not it's toxic. Now, lastly, can you make your own? If you're a DIY C60 oil maker and you do your own thing like me, I've been making my own C60 oil for God knows, I think 6 years going on 7 now. And the answer is yeah. And I'll go over how do you go ahead and do that and what the formula is and stuff like that. So there you go. That's the executive summary. If you're interested in learning about the detail, here we go. Let's jump right in. Now, what is water-soluble C60? As I mentioned, okay, now C60 is a liposoluble substance, okay, it's hydrophobic, but it does dissolve in oil, okay, and it can be dissolved, again, this is a definition right out of one of the studies. You can dissolve regular C60 in vegetable oils, olive oil, avocado oil, MCT, all that. And it's also highly soluble in toluene and xylene. Now, although C60 is insoluble in water, it becomes water-soluble when more than 20 hydroxyl groups, the OH, oxygen-hydrogen groups, pairs, are introduced in it. So here's a diagram of a particular water-soluble C60 molecule that has 24 pairs of oxygen-hydrogen. So the chemistry nomenclature is if it's C60, it's just C carbon, 60 atoms of carbon. This one is C60 with hydroxyl groups There's 24. Okay, so that's how you read that. So there's 24 of these things, and that's what the picture looks like as a molecule. So you can see it's quite different looking. And honestly, you know, in chemistry, if you add anything to a molecule, you've completely changed it, and it has become a new molecule, and it does different things. Now, the thing about this, and I want to share with you for any of you who are interested, is the research on this specific topic. I want to point out one thing. Water-Soluble C60 is the marketing, branding, customer-facing terminology that everyone's using. But in the chemistry world, in the science world, this molecule is also known as, or primarily referenced to as, polyhydroxylated C60. So some studies will refer to it as polyhydroxylated C60. Other studies will refer to it as Fulerenol or Fulerenol. And so why I want to point out the issue with studies is that this thing has 3 different names, and you can imagine how difficult it is to try to find studies that have 3 different names for the same thing. So, but I do want to point out that I did go the last few weeks, and I did collect multiple studies. I collected about 55 separate studies. They're all going to be in a folder on my OneDrive that I'll give you a link to in the video description. So here's all the different studies that I had collected and reviewed for this video, trying to understand everything I could understand about water-soluble C60, or I'll just call it Fulerenol for now. Same name, right? You can see the name right here, Fulerenol. And so basically there's, what I want to point out about this is that, it's really hard to kind of find these studies because of the multiple different names being used. However, once you start locating them and you collecting them and you're reading them, like there's studies from everything about, how do you make it and all that stuff. And then, of course, all the different things that they've used it on and see what happens, kind of, those studies. But there's quite a bit. So there's 55. And luckily, I was able to find one specific study that was your typical study of studies, right? And so luckily, the study that I found, and I'll go over that with you in a second, is, basically scientists looked at 34 separate studies and then wrote a review about the 34 studies, sort of like this video is a review of 55 studies, that sort of thing. So anyway, so it is quite difficult, but there's a ton of studies, and you're more than welcome to click on the folder, and there they all are. Now, here's the big thing you need to know about Fulerenols, okay, is that they come in a multitude of different forms. As noted before, you could take a C60 molecule and attach a hydroxyl pair onto the molecule, and then you will have a C60 OH and N. N is anywhere from 1 to 60 of these little hydroxyl pairs, okay? But in the studies that I reviewed, in the 55 separate studies, there were studies on just that form, that let's call it, that form of a Fulerenol. But then there was also Fulerenols that had a range that had, like, let's say 22 to 24. So in the Fulerenol product itself, or the Fulerenol that they were tested, they had 2 different forms of Fulerenol within the same substance that they were testing. Like, let's say Fulerenol 24 and Fulerenol 26 combined, and then they would go and test it. There were other studies that were done where they were mixing just regular C60 with water-soluble C60, and put it all together into one combination and tested it. There were C60 studies, Fulerenol studies, where they basically had an extra oxygen atoms, or more than one attached. N is just the number of atoms. And then they had also the hydroxyl pairs. Then there were C60 studies that had hydroxyl pairs and sodium hydroxyl pairs. There were C60 studies that had hydroxyl pairs, and then also potassium pairs connected to it. And then there was one product out there that's actually a mix of C60 Fulerenols and also C70 Fulerenols, right? So there's it's just all over the map. And that's one of the key issues. And this is the one thing I really want to impress upon everybody, is that when you see the words water-soluble C60, the marketing name, in the actual product itself it could be anything. I mean, it literally could be anything that's got attached to a C60 molecule. So it's not like just, let's do a study on C60, because C60 is C60. There's no other form of it. It is the form. It's the one form. But a Fulerenol, i.e. water-soluble C60, can be numerous things. It could be up to 100 or more different versions of it, and that's the issue you've got. There's so many versions. It's got to be and then the studies for each specific version makes a huge difference, because some can be harmful according to the studies, some can be beneficial. And so knowing which one is critical, and that's a real gambit in terms of my mind, customer education, and also picking the right one if you're going to be formulating any type of supplement that you're going to have people ingest. And so now that alone is a challenge, right? And then there's also, I found another product, excuse me, that really, it didn't even have a name. It's completely synthetic, not found in nature. I mean, C60 is found in nature. It literally is stardust. The universe is full of it. But there's this one product out there on the market that is a synthesized molecule of C60, and it's called an anisotropic nanoparticle composition. I mean, that's what the patent says for it. The trade name of it's Bucky All, okay? And it's literally a C60 molecule by which one side of the molecule is the normal C60 negative charged, and the other side of the molecule is the Fulerenol positive charged. And I'll go into more about that. But I mean, it's an incredible different version of what you would, and it still is considered water-soluble C60. That's what's really wild about it. Okay, so now just with that clear, there's multiple different versions of what a water-soluble C60 molecule could be. And that's a key thing here. Now, so when we take a look at the products, the challenge with this was, what's in each one of these things, and how do you compare them to each other? And the end result was I couldn't. I wanted to kind of create this little chart, with labeling the products and listing what they, each one of them has in them, what they cost, what their dosage would be, and try to do a comparison to C60 itself, right? C60 oil products, but it's just not possible. There's so many variants that I couldn't find a way to kind of compile it all and show you in a chart. So I'm just going to talk to the issue. So what I did was, obviously, I went and scoured the internet and found the different products. Here they are. This is what's being sold as of now. It's 2024 March, okay? And some of them you could see the prices straight up, and I'll just kind of talk to each one of them. And what's really important here is right here on the bottom is, does the product information anywhere in the literature say what version of Fulerenol that they're using in their product? And the answer is no, yes. This one's got C60OH24. Another one here, C60OH24, it actually says. This one, no, doesn't say. This one here, Bucky All, it doesn't say. This one here is a Russian product, and they're using, they do say that it's, they've got it, it's greater than 40. That's all I could get out of that one. And then there's this one here, which is C60OH, and they're using two different forms. They're using 42 and 46 combined in it, and that's the David Avocado Wolf version of the Fulerenol product. And so that's what you've got. And then what's really interesting here, too, is the Russian product. They've actually got a C60 Detox Water. Because remember, now all of this is C60 Fulerenols in water. So these are all water products. And there's actually one that's just like, let's put it in water and call it, water bottles. And they're selling this in Kazakhstan. I hope I pronounced that right. And so that's kind of the gambit. And so when you want to ask yourself the question, hey, does it cost the same? Well, if you take a look at these, and they also come in different forms. Some of them are concentrates that you take a few droppers full and you put it in a liter of water, and then you just drink that water. Others are just drink it straight out of the bottle. So like this one here, the David Avocado Wolf, he's saying, 2 or 3 droppers per day. Other ones of these are like, take 0.16 milligrams per body, pound of body weight, and then, so there's all this stuff, like, as you can imagine, right? It's really, you can't compare dosages when all of the products are so incredibly different. Now this one right here, couldn't find the price on it. It is a Japanese product, and all the website has is basically the manufacturer's website for the Japanese product. I couldn't find where they're actually selling it, but all of these other ones, the websites are linked. I gave you the websites for everything in the video description if you want to check out the products yourselves. But they're there, they're out there, they're selling it to people. So should we be asking questions like, hey, is it toxic? So here's the thing. I went looking for toxic studies, and I did find a study, a 2013 study called Fulerenol Nanoparticles Toxicity and Antioxidant Activity. So now when you pull this puppy up, it's right out of a book, and unfortunately I couldn't figure out what book it's from. Sorry. But there are some like it's, yeah, here it is. I'm sorry. It says, it's out of the Oxidative Stress and Nanotechnologies, Methods and Protocols, Methods in Molecular Biology, okay? And here's the ISBN number, I think. All right, so this is the book. Sorry about that. I forgot about that. And so now if you take a look at Chapter 5 of the book and you go to 5.5, Fulerenol in vitro toxicity, let's just take a peek at what they say. So is Fulerenols toxic? And so I'll just read you the first paragraph. The assessment of Fulerenol toxicity is an absolute and obvious prerequisite for its potential use in biomedicine and consumer products, obviously. Recent studies describe lower toxicity of Fulerenol and other water-soluble fullerenes against dermal fibroblasts and liver carcinomas cells in comparison to pure C60. That's interesting. So lower than C60. It was demonstrated that the cytotoxic activity of C60 colloidal it was caused by ROS, which is basically radical oxygen species, free radicals, mediated cell membrane lipid peroxidation. Okay, so furthermore, Isakovic, that's one of the authors, demonstrated that one of the scientists for this study, number 45, in this document demonstrated that pure C60 and Fulerenols, C60OHX, they're using X, I use N, apparently employ different cytotoxic mechanisms resulting in preferential induction of caspase independent necrosis and blah, 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 blah. So this goes on and on and on. And if you read this chapter, what it comes down to is it kind of goes back to my original point, which is, hey, you know what? There's a whole bunch of different ones, and it really depends on which one you're talking about. And so there's no like overall, paintbrush over it. Is it toxic or not? Well, the answer is depends. It depends on which one of, which version of the Fulerenol is being tested. And also, now here's another dynamic that's very important, is that it appears that Fulerenols are sensitive to UV, just like C60. And so some of these, I found one study, I believe it was like, if you expose it to UV, then it's going to become pro-oxidant, just like C60 would be. Because C60 itself is not a perfect molecule. You have to be cautious with it. It has to be dark, and it's also in oil, so you have to be, dark and cool place for storage and that sort of thing. But if you do it right, you're fine. I'm sure that it applies to the same thing with Fulerenols. But the issue here, again, though, is it depends on which one you're looking at, which version of Fulerenols you're referring to, as to whether or not it's toxic. So the interesting thing, though, in the research was there appears to be one version that stands out amongst the rest. In the bulk of the studies that I looked at, and the review of studies that I looked at, was a particular version, C60OH24. Now, this version of the Fulerenols was studied in a study called the Differential Cytotoxicity of Water-Soluble Fullerenes, and this is a 2004 study, okay? And it actually states in the study that the C60OH24 shows no cytotoxicity up to its limits of solubility. This provides striking evidence that water-soluble function groups on the surface of a fullerene molecule dramatically decrease the toxicity of pristine C60. So after 30 hours of exposure to Nano C60, cells begin to exhibit signs of leaky membranes and lipid oxidation. However, we have concluded that this toxicant does not oxidize the cell's proteins or disrupt the normal function of certain cellular organelles. Okay? So, like again, there's so many different studies and so many different versions that if you really got to drill and drill and drill and drill to kind of find out, is it toxic or not? And so the best I could do was to kind of just find the data for you to review if you're interested, but also to just from a high level summary, just saying, hey, you know what? I found one that does stand out amongst the rest, which is the 24. Okay, so C60OH24. So keep that in mind. We're going to be talking about that here in a little bit. So the other question then, of course, is what are the effects? And so here's that review of studies. So, and I love these when I find these, which is a study called The Review of Synthesis and Antioxidant Potential of Fulerenol Nanoparticles, published in 2015. So let's take a look at this guy. Now, this guy, I love this study because in the study, they talk about all of these different studies that they looked at and all of the different combinations and the ways people were doing it and blah, 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 blah. And here you go. It comes down to this one chart. And it kind of, this is their quote conclusion. And so their conclusion was, let's take a look at all 34. We'll categorize it by the type of fulerenol was studied, what cells and animals it was studied on, critical, and what were the main biological effects. So you can see here a C60OH2226 was tested on human lens epithelial cells. And basically they found that the human lens epithelial cells, they were increasing reactive oxygen species and apoptosis. Okay, so good or bad? Honestly, I don't know. Okay, and then you get into like here's C60OHN, and they don't even tell you which one. There's the C60OHON, that's a sodium also too. And so basically they were testing this on tubal cells, and I got to tell you, I got a C in college chemistry, so I just want a disclaimer right there. I'm a tinker, not a biochemist, but I'm trying to do my best here on the research because I had these questions. I wanted to know the answer, and I figured you guys did too. So, because we're all biohackers. We're always looking for the next best supplement. Is this one it? I don't know, but here we go. Remember that I told you about the C60OH24? Now here you go. This one's on human umbilical vein endothelial cells. Sorry, I'm not familiar with all these words. I'm trying my best here. And this one showed that it actually stimulated autophagy and cell growth. Whoa, that's a good thing. Here's another one on human again, and this one was some kind of chemistry stuff that does not clear on what the whether it was positive or not. Again, they did another 24. So all of these different studies of the 34 studies that were reviewed in this study. I know it's like having a meeting about meetings, right? But they all basically, the 24s basically were quite positive. In this one here on human, I don't know, cat keratinocytes. I don't even know what that is. But it's basically showing, hey, it's increasing mitochondrial activity, increasing O2. That's a good thing, actually, no matter where you're at in your body. And then also another 24 one here on macrophages. And then you've got these other ones here. Like here's a C60OH32 on human epidermal. I guess it's your skin cells, right? And they basically the end result was the biological activity was cell death. Cell death is probably not a good thing. So let's chalk 32 off the board. So then you've got this 22 to 26, and you've got 22 to 26, and again it goes on and on and on. So I'm not going to read all of them to you because you probably get bored. But what I want to do is just kind of show you what I was looking at. And here's one that's C60OH20. I think this is what's really, breast cancer metastasis, anti-tumor and metastatic activities, modulation of oxidative stress in tumor tissues. That's a good thing. So far, just cursory overview, and you can see how much data is here to sift through. But there's like 24 pops up a lot with positive results, 20 pops up positive results. And then you get into some more of these where you're looking at I'm more interested in mammal studies. And so then you get into the rat studies here in addition to the human studies. And so once you get into the rat studies here on the next page, here's where you start getting into the C60OH24 on rats, antioxidant protected hepatocytes against doxorubin toxicity and irritability of peritoneum and abdominal tissue. Okay, that's a good thing, right? And then you get into more rat studies where they start talking about Wilstar rats, which I want to point out something about Wilstar rats or Wistar rats. I hope I'm pronouncing that one right. Was, if you recall, the original study of C60 on rats that basically showed that rats live twice as long. That's like the famous rat study. They also known as the Paris study, also known as the body study. That one used Wistar rats. Okay, so it's kind of like, okay, if you want to understand whether or not fullerenols do the same thing as C60 by itself, when you're talking about testing it on Wistar rats, that's how you do a apples to apples comparison to that 2012 study, which is really a big deal because that's the the benchmark for everybody, and that's the majority of the C60 products on the market today follow the formula of that one study. So it's really kind of pinnacle. So that one study, meaning I'll just call it the body study. That's the guy that was the lead researcher on that study. So when you start taking a look at C6024 on Wistar rats, then you get into this antioxidant protecting against antioxidant protecting again, and also against toxicity, and then here it reducing the level of GR, increasing the presence of DMSO. And also to direct scavenging activity of nitric oxide radicals, superoxide anions. Okay, these are all really good things. Okay, in terms of its ability to eliminate free radicals from your body, meaning super antioxidant, very healthy for us. So it seems like there's a band, of the number of hydroxyl pairs you could attach to a C60 molecule that when you're within that band, it has very, very good antioxidant protective effects. And that's a good thing. So that's the good thing of the research that I discovered. However, if you stray outside that band, then you start running into situations where you're not getting positive results. So, but again, it's very difficult to nail it down because there's just so many different versions and so many different studies, and they're studying on so many different things. Okay, so but I did want to kind of just share that with you. That there is one that did stand out. It's that C60H24, and I think, and then when you look at the products, you can see that that's the one that these two guys decided to use. Right, these two different products, and that's the one they're using. And then of course you got this one out here. You got David Avocado Wolf, and he, and in his little commercial for this product, he's saying, "I got the best scientists, I got the best equipment, and the best quality products," and that's his marketing pitch. But he's using 4246, which by the way didn't show up in any of the review studies that I looked at. Okay, so they're just claims, but I also, so it's really hard to say what are the effects. But if you were to take a step back and you're like, well, it's pretty much the same type of information you get when you're studying C60 by itself. But now I want to kind of share with you something that I think is just remarkable. And one thing that we have a Telegram C60 Biohacker Telegram group, okay? And we had a gentleman, his name is Dmitry, and he's with the Nagatoshi Project, and this is the Russian-based project. And they're basically a group of scientists that have pulled together, got venture funding, and they're creating this hybrid water-soluble C60 Fulerenol and C70 Fulerenol, combine it together, and they're doing some experiments with it. And what's really interesting is that they're the first ones that I can find out there in the world that are actually experimenting with humans. And so I asked him, hey, can you give me an example? Like, what are you guys learning about using your version of fullerenols? It's a combination of C60 and C70 fullerenols. And what are you finding? And so he shared this with me, and thank you very much for that, Dimitri. And I think it's fascinating. So here, this is what he says. It's like, in April, together with the Karaganda Medical University, we begin to design preclinical studies of modified oils and fullerenols. Okay, you have to wait a little. It's 6 to 8 months before the clinical trial is completed. However, basically, here's an example of what they're finding with using fullerenols. Okay, this is a combination blend of C60 and C70. Okay, here's the most recent one testing the cream on modified oils for various types of psoriasis. This is a 25-year-old girl, allergic dermatitis. The treatment period is 10 days. You could see how bad it was. And then after 10 days, it just goes down, down, and gone in 10 days. And that is remarkable. It's the only human study or, anything, clinical trial study, anything out there. And they're doing it right now. So thank you, Dimitri, for sharing that so that I could put it in the video. I think it's remarkable. It just shows that there is something about fullerenols that makes it very, very positive as a supplement. Now, the Nagatoshi Project again is they're producing a product, and that's being put in other products, right? So they've got a skin topical product that's out in the market now. They've got that water bottle that they're selling in Kazakhstan, the C60 Detox Water, and then they've got several other little bottles, different combinations of C60, C70 Fulerenols in a little dropper bottle. So they got quite a few products, and some of these other ones have quite a few products as well. And so yeah, it's really interesting what the Nagatoshi Project is doing. Now, I also want to point out that there's that other version, that anisotropic nanoparticle compositions. This was a wild one that popped up in the research, and so this is a guy. His name is Peter Robert Butzloff, and he created a product called Bucky All. Now, there's and honestly, when you search YouTube for anybody that's talked about any of this, it really is almost like 2 videos. That's really it. And I searched and searched and searched, like for lectures and presentations, and I found a lot of advertising. There's a lot of marketing, but actually, hey, can you explain this at a science level? And there's only 2, and so this was the one about the product Bucky All. And so the website here is basically saying, hey, when you have this really bizarre hybrid, Fulerenol molecule that is half C60 and half Fulerenol, then basically they're saying, hey, this thing is really, really incredible. And this is what their studies have been saying. Their website basically says, hey, it enhances cell metabolism, removes free radicals, inhibits cell degradation and inflammation and all that stuff. And then in the video, if you watch the video, link in the video description below, of Peter Butzloff, basically explaining the science behind his product, he really points out the issue that his Fulerenol really supports the mitochondria. It helps with neural regeneration, so people with MS, Alzheimer's, it's really been quite a find for those, tumor reduction, and supports vascular health. And so these are some of the claims that are being made, in addition to all the other claims of all the other products that are made, is that they're all claiming that it's as good, if not better, than C60. Okay, and then does the literature, and that's the key, does the literature support that? And the literature, again, it really depends. It really depends on which one you're talking about. And so there is studies in the science literature that say, yeah, some of them do support those claims. Some of them don't. So which one are you using? So we go back to that. So here we go. So that's Bucky All, and I think that's really interesting. The only weird thing about Bucky All is that it's dropped off the face of the earth. I was looking at this product, and I started actually several months ago. I started looking into this when Dimitri first joined our group, and it got me curious. So I started poking around. I found this. I looked at it briefly, and then when I went back to look at it again, 3 months later in March, in preparing for doing this video, it fell off the face of the earth. The website's gone. The last known screen capture of it in archive.org was December 23rd. After that, you try to go to the website, it's gone. There's nothing there. It's like it never existed. And I also went and looked at all the different places that were selling it. It's only sold outside the US, and all of the sites that used to sell it are all currently out of stock. So I don't know what happened with this one. It's either, I just don't know. Something happened and they're just disappeared. But I wanted to put it in there because, it's part of the research. And so, yeah, it's kind of an interesting story on this one. So everything in the link below, even the copy of the patent for this thing, or what I could find on the patent. Okay, so with that said, what are the effects of water-soluble C60 as compared to C60? So I just wanted to throw this in because, it's kind of cool that there was a 2023 study on whole animals. Okay, now this is the key thing. If you've been following C60, or if you've seen my videos, or I've been looking for C60 studies, lipofullerenes, okay, there's so many C60 studies. We're just talking C60 now. And the issue with C60 studies is just as complicated, but not as much because there's only one version. However, there's multiple different ways that you could subject a critter or cells in vitro, in vivo, cells, and just, the whole idea is that, and also pristine, which means just by itself, or in oil, which is lipofullerene. And it's really difficult. There aren't a whole lot of studies about C60 in oil with animals. Okay, there just aren't. And so that's what's key, because that's exactly what we're doing, right? We are the human trial for C60, and I want to know. I don't care about, oh, you made a rat, breathe the powder in the air, and they got black lung. Yeah, no kidding. That's what happens to coal miners. So that's a common sense thing, and that's actually a study. But actually, what happens to animals when they take C60 in oil, and then looking at just those studies, and so. This one popped up, so it's really kind of like, oh, this is cool. And we got, here's a new C60 study just last year. And what did they find when they tested liposoluble? That means lipid, right? That's a lipofullerene on cellular, molecular, and whole animal levels. And so just just one sentence out of the whole study, just to share with you, to say, hey, you know what? This is C60, strongly absorbs free radicals, inhibits the toxicity of chemical toxins, toxicants, resists radiation, prevents ultraviolet damage, and prevents heavy metal induced cell damage. And they proved it. This study says, hey, that's what C60 does. That's one of the reasons I take C60, because it's got some incredible properties. And so when you say, well, are they finding that fulerenols do the same thing as a C60? If you look at what C60 can do per this study, the answer is, yeah, it is. Everything I've read, it tells me that the fulerenols can do the same as C60 does. Okay, but depends on which version of the fulerenol we're talking about. And the thing about it, though, and this is where it all kind of just stops, and you go, well, wait a minute. One of the biggest things about C60 is it promotes longevity. So now there are 2 published studies and a third one that wasn't published that says it does. And I'm talking about C60. So now the original one, the body study, that rat study, the 2012, study in Paris, that says, the title of that one was The Prolongation of the Lifespan of Rats by Repeated Oral Administration of C60 Fullerene. This is the 2012 study. The conclusion, or the results of that study, and this was a study that was meant to see how much C60 you could give a rat before half the population of your subject group died. Okay, there was like an OSHA study. They needed to know, how dangerous was C60 for all the people that were handling it in industry, because it's an industrial solvent. So there's tons and tons and tons of factories and so forth, people that are handling C60 in industry, and they wanted to know, like OSHA, right? Like, what's the level of exposure before you kill off all these workers? And so that's why they did this study back then. And so, but and this was the beauty of that study was that it doesn't hurt you, it helps you, and you live twice as long if you're a rat. And so here it is our results show that while olive oil treatment can lead to an increase of 18%, in rats, lifespan, C60 olive oil can increase it up to 90% as compared to controls. And that's that magic sentence that popped out of this study that just threw C60 into the limelight. And so, so it's been proven by this study. And then in 2021, there was another study done called The Effect of Long-Term Treatment with C. fullerenes on the Lifespan and Health Study of CBA/CA Mice. And in 2021, this study came out, and it just basically stipulated in the abstract. I have not been able to get my hands on the full study, but I do have the abstract. And it just basically stipulates treatment of mice with C. fullerenes resulted in an increased lifespan of male and females compared with the olive oil treated animals. So they repeated the same body study but used mice instead, and they discovered, yeah, it does increase lifespan. So those are 2 of the studies. The third study, if you follow C60 news, is you'll know that Ian Mitchell of Wizard Sciences, he's one of the foremost authorities on C60 on the planet. He did his own study. It was a proprietary commercial study. Okay, so commercial studies are not academic studies. People who make products will do studies, and to basically see, to perfect their product. So he did a study. He repeated. This is Ian Mitchell. He repeated the body study, the Paris study, But instead of Wistar rats, he used P53 knockout rats. And his study basically duplicated the exact same results except with one caveat, and that he found that 93% of his rats, lived twice as long, or lived 93% longer. Okay, so he found his rats lived 93%. The variance of between the two studies is so small that it essentially proved, and he states this in multiple interviews, that he did this study with rats, and he basically confirmed the findings of the body study. So that's 3 studies, 2 published, 1 commercial not published, that basically says C60 will extend the lifespan of these little small mammals, which is what you hear anybody, everybody who sells C60 promotes it like, oh, it's for anti-aging, it's longevity. And that's why they do that, is because it's been proven. But here's the thing. When it comes to water-soluble C60, there are no longevity studies. And that's the one place that I found that it's highly, disparate between C60 and water-soluble C60 is in regards to longevity. Okay, so keep that in mind if you're interested in using water-soluble C60 in place of C60. If your goal is longevity, you might want to stay with C60 because it just hasn't been studied yet. I'm not saying it doesn't; it just hasn't been studied. So the next thing I want to know is, what do the experts say? So again, there's only 2 or 3 videos in all of the world right now about water-soluble C60. This will be one of the handfuls of them. And so when I went looking to answer this question, so one of the first things was I found a video by Chris Burris of SES Research. Now, if you don't know who Chris is, he is the lead research scientist for SES Research, and SES Research was the company that supplied C60 to the rat study, the Paris rat study. So his company, basically was the one back in the day. They formed their company in 1991, and they go back. They actually worked when they were in college, him and his partner, they worked with the graduate students that actually supported Smalley and Curl, sorry, I forgot the third guy, but the 3 guys that discovered C60 originally and then got the Nobel Peace Prize for it. Well, their graduate students were associates of Chris Burris and his partner Robert. And so that they go back to 91, even though this guy looks really super young. He's one of us old guys. And he is, again, one of the foremost experts on C60 on the market. This is his industry. And so he made a video, and basically his video was basically trying to just kind of share with his thoughts on water-soluble C60 and what people should be thinking about before trying it as a C60 guy, okay? And so I kind of just bullet pointed some of the things he said in his video. Of course, you can take a look at it in the video description link. But here it is. Basically, he just says, hey, it's a matter of characterization. Chris says, peer-reviewed studies show that water-soluble C60 is harmful, and that's correct. Okay, again, depending on version. It's very challenging to determine how many hydroxyl groups have been added to C60 molecule. That's a biochemistry thing. Which you'd kind of wonder, like, if some of these companies are they how aware are they of this particular version that they've got? Because if you're making your own, Chris is saying as a chemist, it's very hard to tell how many hydroxyl groups you actually ended up putting on to that molecule. And then, of course, the different number of hydroxyl groups have the capacity to react very differently. Again, true. You can see that in the review of the studies. You can look at the studies I've collected. And then many companies do not share what version they are putting on the market. I confirm that, exactly as you saw on that one slide. They don't even tell you what they're using, which should be a red flag. Research is done on specific areas, but toxicity studies of water-soluble C60 are not available. Okay, so that's partially true, because if you look at it in the context of, has anyone done an LD50 OSHA study to see how much water-soluble C60 you can expose yourself to before half of your population of your participants are dead? No one's done that study. There are no LD50 studies on water-soluble C60 that I have found. If anyone finds one, please let me know. Okay, but it's true that they're just not available. However, as I pointed out earlier, there are toxicity studies of specific water soluble versions, okay, but not one that's like an LD50 OSHA type study. And then lastly, Chris mentions in his video, without the type of study conducted by Fati Musa, okay, that's the famous Paris study, his recommendation is you should not be consuming that product, at least not yet. And I completely agree with Chris. I think Chris is a very smart guy, knows his stuff, and everything he said, I went and kind of, fact checked it, and he's spot on every bullet point. And then the other thing I want to point out is another expert is Fati Musa himself. Okay, this is the guy that kicked it off, and he's the one that did the rat study, that Paris study in 2012. Now, if you look at that study, in the last section of the study before the citations, he writes a conclusion paragraph. And in this conclusion paragraph, Fati Musa states very clearly in the conclusion, where he talks about about treating the rats and what happened, and then whether or not it's going to kill off everybody and is it toxin and stuff, toxic stuff. But basically, he goes on to say something that's really kind of important about water-soluble C60. And then basically, let me just kind of pick this up. Okay, so basically, anyway, this work should open the road towards the development of the considerable potential of C60 in the biomedical field. And boy, hasn't it, including cancer therapy, neurodegenerative disorders, and aging. Okay. Furthermore, in the field of aging, as C60 can be administered orally and it is now produced in tons, it is no longer necessary to resort to its water-soluble derivatives, which are difficult to purify and, in contrast to pristine C60, may be toxic. And that's what he said. And he's true. And that's right. That's 100% right. Everything, so that's a highly accurate statement. And again, just like Chris, he's like, hey, you know what? C60 in olive oil, we proved it's not toxic. We proved it does all this incredible stuff. Be careful with water solubles, Fulerenols, because, hey, they may be toxic. Okay, and that's what I'm hoping to have shown you in today's video. So then the last part here is, can you make your own? So for those of you who are like, yeah, you want to try it, great. You want to try and make your own, you can do it. Let me show you how. Okay. Excuse me. The first one is, where can you buy it? Well, it's readily available. There's different sites that sell it. You've got Solaris Chem in Canada. They sell Fulerenols. You've got MST in Europe. They sell Fulerenols. So it's quite easy to basically order the Fulerenols from a certified chemistry lab that will sell you the actual Fulerenols. Okay, so you can go ahead and buy them. If you want to know how to make them, here's an article by Heischler Ultrasonics, where it basically gives you a ultrasonic synthesis of water-soluble 660, step-by-step instructions on how to make your own. So can you make your own? Absolutely. What are the mixing methods? Well, it's just Fulerenol in water. You can stir it. It only takes less than 30 seconds. So unlike C60 in oil, which takes 2 weeks, the mixing methods are, you could either use a stirrer or you could use an ultrasonic, but either way, the formula is quite simple. This formula came from Pierre at Solaris Chem, the founder and proprietor of Solaris Chem. Basically, the solution is Fulerenol in water. The formula is the solubility. You can add up to 220 grams per liter. That's the saturation rate. And the time to dissolve is 30 seconds. So here again, this is another point I want to make about the products. If it can take up to 200 grams per liter, okay, none of these products tell you how much Fulerenol is in the water, is in the bottle. Okay, unlike, like when you get a bottle of C60 oil, it'll tell you in there that it's like, oh, it's got like 0.8 milligrams per liter 0.8 milligrams per milliliter is the typical amount of C60 in oil that will be on the label to tell you, okay, I'm not just buying oil, I'm buying C60 in oil, and the majority of the cost is the C60. So you want to know you're getting your money's worth, right? Well, all of these products, they don't stipulate how much C60 Fulerenol, right, is in their product. And so if you can go from 0 or like 1 gram to 220 grams per liter, then you don't really know how much you're getting. And that's another issue, is not only do you not know which version, or let's say even know which version, but you don't know how much is actually in the bottle. Okay, and that's another issue with the product labeling that I found when looking at the products. So again, this is how you would do it yourself. And it's really kind of interesting where I know that the saturation for C60 is the baseline is from the body study, that Paris study, is zero point 0.8 milligrams per milliliter. And according to Ian Mitchell, you can get way beyond that, depending on the type of oils you use and the methodology you're using to mix the two together. I'm sure it's the same for Fullerenols. And again, it really, again, it's like another variant, right? Not only do you have what version, you've got how much is in there and so forth. So there you go on that one. So the last slide, I just kind of want to sum it up and just like, so do you want to try it? Here's the pros. The pros again, let me summarize. It's got some incredible properties that can do some incredible stuff that's like C60, right? Everything from tumor suppression, super antioxidant. I mean, it's a great supplement depending on version, okay? And the products that are out there are sort of all over the map. And it's really hard to figure out what you're getting, how much of it you're getting, and what's the cost benefit. Does it promote longevity? No. Okay, it hasn't been proven yet, okay? Do we know exactly how toxic it is? Well, yeah, the 60 OH24, yes, there's a study on that one, but not on the other ones, right? So for me, this just, so we're all going to have to make a decision, and we don't have to make, I'm sorry. You can make a decision if you want to. Hey, do you want to try this new supplement? It's out there on the market. People are selling it. And do you want to try something that could be the next big thing? And honestly, my conclusion after studying this intensely for 3 weeks is, for longevity, I would stick with C60. For health, I wouldn't mind trying Fulerenols at all. Because, I jumped in both feet into C60 in 2017 when, most of the studies on mammals hadn't even been done yet. And I jumped in just purely on one study that said it promoted longevity, and that is the holy grail of biohacking. And so and it was super antioxidant, so I just jumped right in both feet, start taking it. And I've been taking C60 since 2017. And then of course all the studies keep coming out, proving over and over that it's not toxic, etc. Now, will I do the same thing with Fullerenols? Yeah, I definitely would, but I would stick to C60 OH24, or what I'm thinking of trying, and thanks to Dimitri, is I'm going to try his product as soon as I can get it. A little trouble there getting mail from Russia nowadays. But the idea, though, is I definitely am very interested in trying his product because he's trying it already. They're in clinical trials on humans with some really incredible results. And so it's like, okay, I'll give that a try. Would I try Bucky All? It's not even available. Would I try, David Avocado Wolf's one or these other ones? Not unless I knew exactly what it was. But with the Spacelaba product, which is the Russian product, I'm willing to give it a try. So I'm going to be doing a trial of my own, trying that product and see how it works for me. I want to see if it gives me the same benefits that I get with C60 now, which I can measure clearly. It prevents me from getting any UV light radiation. I don't get sunburned. I can eat things that are toxic to me that like other people. Like I'm really highly sensitive to MSG, so I avoid MSG like the plague. However, when I'm taking C60, I can eat all I want and it doesn't even bother me. It's just crazy. So that'll be another way to tell whether or not it's working for me, that sort of thing. So, and then of course, just monitoring my general well-being and stuff like that while I'm taking it. So I'm looking forward to trying it. I definitely want to try it because I'm a biohacker and we live on the edge. We are the human trial. I'm not encouraging you or discouraging you from trying it. I just want to present to you what I learned. All the data I collected is available for you to review, but this is the summary of Water-Soluble C60. To answer the question, is it the next big thing in biohacking? My answer is too early to tell. Okay? So, with that said, thank you very much for sticking it out with me on this video. Tons of information, tons of data, and I just want to say, hey, thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. If you want to learn more about me and the work I do, You can reach me at tinkers.academy. Just type that in your URL window that goes to my blog. Of course, I got a YouTube channel. And if you like this kind of content, like and subscribe. I'd appreciate it. So thank you very much. Mahalo. Have a great day. And I hope this was educational for you. Aloha.